My name's John Paul Flintoff. I'm a writer on the Sunday Times and author of a new book called Through the Eye of a Needle, which tells a story about my attempts to get to grips with the subject of clothing in a serious way and its impact on the planet, because it seems to me that quite a lot of people now understand the topic of local seasonal food, but clothing is exactly the same. Meat and vegetables is leather and plant fibres, and a lot of people haven't quite got that. So even on the TV there are programs about food shortages, but there could one day be a clothing shortage. And I know that sounds funny, and I quite like the fact that it sounds funny. It helped me write a book that had some humour in it. But there have been clothing shortages in the past. And the one that I learned about not that long ago while I was researching my book, which really made me excited, was about the First World War experience of the Germans, when Britain controlled 90% of world cotton. And everybody in Europe at the time relied on cotton. But the Germans faced going into battle naked if they couldn't come up with an alternative crop. And they rediscovered the virtues of the humble nettle, which grows as a weed and has traditionally clothed people in this part of the world for a very, very long time. And when I started looking into it, I discovered that for the best part of 30 years, from the First World War into the Second World War, the Germans were developing some very fine nettles. They were choosing the best ones and cloning them and planting them in great acreages. And lots of their uniforms in the First World War were made substantially of nettle. Now, people are now rediscovering, you can go to fancy restaurants in London, people are rediscovering the virtues of the nettle leaf for soups and for food. But so what do you do with the stems? Well, a little bit later than now, and I'm talking in August, if you leave it a little bit later in the year and you cut the stems and you leave them on the floor for a week or two, let them get a bit damp, that's good. And then you dry them out and you peel these hair-like fibres off the stems, you will have a wonderfully fine, soft wool kind of thing, a bit like cotton wool. And what I did for my book, because after I'd made this shirt and then made some jeans and made other things, I decided what I had to do for this book was to make a whole outfit right down to the underpants, and so I did do that. I made shoes and everything, but I wanted to try to use local and sustainable products. Nettles grow as a weed, so they don't need fertiliser, they don't need pesticide, they will look after themselves. We've got very low kind of carbon emissions associated with them. So I thought, if I can make my nettle underpants or whatever it's going to be, other people might be tempted to do the same, and I can assure you they don't sting. So I got lots of this nettle fibre and I spun it with help from someone in the London Guild of Spinners, Dyers and Weavers, and I'm so glad that that guild still exists. And she helped me to spin this stuff, and she also told me a really fascinating fact, which is that the fibres on nettles are longer than on Egyptian cotton, so they're actually better. It's a better crop, but I think, I don't want to go too far with this idea, but I think actually in a funny sort of way, the English are also, strangely, victims of their own colonial history, because having invaded other countries and taken their crops, we've become slightly too snooty about our own. But what I've really taken out of this is that, in a funny kind of way, I was wearing a hair shirt, but actually the truth is that I found the whole process really enjoyable. A lot of people have learned that growing food is fun. Well, I can assure you that making your own clothes is fun too. And so, where many people think dealing with climate change and energy shortages is going to be really grim and horrible, I've really enjoyed it. So that's good. Enjoy it yourself if you want to. I'm not going to tell you you have to. That's all I want to say.
Do you think sort of Gandhi and homespun nettles?
Gandhi is absolutely the man in this. I'm aware of how it sounds either facetious or ironic when I say that he's been like the guiding light, but everything that he was doing was spot on. And he realised that if you got Indians to spin their own cotton, there would be no need to export it back to England, and the English cotton industry, which exploited Indians, would wither, and then the reason for England being in India would disappear. And so by lots of people like him spinning, that was the end of the British Empire in India. He really knew what he was talking about, and he didn't just talk about it, he invented his own spinning wheel and took it to political meetings. Everyone laughed at him, then they thought he might be on something, and then he was right.